Look at the credits of any major television showrunner/producer, and you'll undoubtedly find one or more shows that only lasted a single season. Sometimes these shows are fondly remembered cult classics, like Firefly or Mission Hill, but more often than not, they're completely forgotten shows with no perceivable legacy to speak of. Snoops, starring Gina Gershon, is one such show. And while Snoops didn't even manage to air all of its episodes before being pulled out of ABC's schedule, it is proof that not all of these forgotten series are detritus that deserve to be forgotten. Snoops was created by David E. Kelley, a legendary writer and producer with an extensive list of credits, continuing to the present day. When he created Snoops, his hit-miss ratio was flawless. After entering TV as a writer on LA Law, he co-created Doogie Howser, MD. He followed that series up with shows he created solo: Picket Fences, Chicago Hope, The Practice, and Ally McBeal, all of which lasted several seasons. He not only created these shows, but also was a showrunner on each of them, and a frequent writer. Snoops seemed destined to become a monumental success that would last several seasons, but you already know how this story ends. Snoops is a show about a private detective agency called Glen Hall, Inc. The agency is located in Los Angeles and mostly has female employees. Glen Hall, head of the agency, mostly tries to accept ethical cases, but occasionally things get sketchy and morally complicated. Gina Gershon, despite not being the creator of Snoops or one of its writers, had a massive impact on the show's identity. She was originally approached by Kelley about playing the female lead of the series, but Gershon felt the male lead part was more interesting.
Well, actually, originally it was the man's part, right. And I kind of said, but you know what, and he wanted me for the woman's part, duh. And
he's a bright guy.
Yeah, but where he's truly inspired is I kind of said, you know what, I kind of like the guy's part. He said, well, then great, you're the guy.
That's cool.
And I've always liked playing with men's parts.
And so Gina Gershon was given the part of Glen Hall. I can only assume the name was left unchanged.
Glenn. Isn't that a guy's name? Forget about my name.
It's obvious the part was rewritten to some degree to reflect Gershon's casting, but it needs to be emphasized that Gershon single-handedly gave Snoops 90% of its appeal by suggesting she play a part originally written for a guy. Not only did it make the detective agency mostly women, giving the show a unique edge, but it also provided the show with a bunch of distinct female characters. The part Gershon was originally asked to play, former police detective Dana Plant, is more of a stick-in-the-mud type of female character, a rule follower. Gershon's character, Glen Hall, is the sly rule breaker. To reiterate, having both sides of this dichotomy be women is what provides the series with its appeal. In 1995 and 1996, Gershon had the legendary 1-2 punch of appearing in Showgirls and Bound, but aside from a supporting role in Face Off, things had been rocky since. She had appeared in a neo-noir film called This World, Then the Fireworks that only received a very limited release, and another neo-noir called Palmetto that received a larger release but bombed anyways. Gershon had nothing to do with either of these films underperforming, but they probably both had an effect on her bankability as an actress. In 1999, it was still verboten for a film actor to appear on television. Gershon had appeared in TV shows before Snoops, but either as a starring role in TV movies or in small guest appearances. Gina Gershon appearing as the lead in Snoops probably seemed like a win-win for everyone. She brought the prestige of an actress associated with film to the little screen, and for Gershon, what better way to revitalize her career than to get the leading role in a David E. Kelley series? The cast of Snoops is as follows. Glen Hall began Snoops with an extensive history working as a PI. She got the money to found her own agency shortly before the series begins, when she was paid by a billionaire to sleep with his kid's kidnapper.
Do you know how she paid for this place? She found some billionaire's missing kid by promising to have sex with the kidnapper.
And the point is I got the kid back when the police couldn't.
She isn't fazed by using her sex appeal to get information out of suspects. She also doesn't care about breaking the law in order to receive evidence. Hall knows the work she does is morally dubious, but 90% of the time she's sure enough about what she's doing that it doesn't bother her. Glenn Hall is incredibly self-assured and cool, and is viewed that way by others within the canon of the show. All that being said, Hall can't anticipate everything, and she sometimes gets into trouble. She has the occasional foible, which prevents her character from feeling OP. Hall was also an orphan who spent her youth moving through a series of foster homes, which provides some insight into her self-sufficient character. In short, Glenn Hall is an ideal character for Gina Gershon. In one episode, Hall mentions that she designed an infrared camera capable of detecting arousal for an 8th grade science project.
That infrared's gonna tell us if he gets aroused.
I know it'll work. I did it for my 8th grade science project.
This is odd because her apparent genius level intellect is only mentioned this one time, in a different character as the resident tech guru. Dana Plant is a former police detective who decides in the pilot to join the private sector. Plant is a nerdier and more by-the-books character than Hall, and she often struggles with the perception that she's lamer than Hall. For instance, in one episode a suspect needs to be seduced, and Plant is insulted that she's not even considered for the job.
Manny, you don't think I could make a man want to jump into bed?
Well, yes.
She sometimes is the person who complains about Hall's methods being illegal, and other times she wants to prove that she can hang. All that being said, she's highly competent at her job. Manny Lott is the guy, the tech whiz, and the comedy relief. He's a new-ish PI who's overconfident and dorky. He regularly talks about how often he jerks off.
Jennifer Lopez. 3 times a day, 4 if I'm bored.
Thank you for sharing that, Manny.
He also finds excuses to act inappropriately with the other detectives while in character on the job. He also has anger management problems. Surprisingly, he's not nearly as annoying as he sounds. It helps that Lott is firmly a subordinate to Hall, which prevents him from feeling like a mandated, male voice of reason character. He also carries no angst relating to working entirely with women, which is a plus. Another new-ish PI, Roberta Young often feels like she's being underestimated and speaks in a direct, no-bullshit manner.
Sometimes I feel you don't have the same confidence in me.
She's frequently the character who drops a bit of down-to-earth wisdom.
Investigating somebody's sexuality isn't any worse than half the stuff we do here.
Then why do you feel worse about it?
Roberta Young feels less defined than the other members of the core cast. Paula Jai Parker deserves a lot of credit for breathing life into a threadbare character who needed more substance. A character who needed some kind of unique element to become truly defined. The final regular cast member is Greg McCormack, a police detective who used to be in a relationship with Dana Plant. He frequently comes into contact with Hall and company for various reasons. Greg is more by the books than Plant, and is a cop guy. Not an especially interesting character, but also the least prominent member of the main cast. In each episode, Glenn Hall and Dana Plant usually work together on an especially pressing and challenging case, while Lott and Young work together on something a little bit lower stakes. That being said, the two duos spend enough time at the office together to interact with each other. You're probably assuming I only found out about Snoops because I'm a Gina Gershon fan, and you'd be correct. It's one of only 2 shows where Gershon appears as a main cast member. If you're a Gina Gershon fan, you'll find a lot to enjoy in Snoops. Snoops is from a completely different era of television. While there are a handful of plotlines in the background that prevent the show from being entirely episodic, it needs to be emphasized that those plotlines are firmly in the background. This is not like a modern streaming series where you lose 30% of the effect of the show if you don't watch it in linear order. With Snoops, it would be more like 10%. It's refreshing to watch a show like this. So many streaming series unnecessarily consist of season-long plot lines that make individual episodes feel overlong in order to provide each major plot beat with its own 45 minutes. The running threads in the background of each Snoops episode never get in the way of telling discrete stories. It also needs to be mentioned that Snoops is extremely of its time, in a different sense. The Wendy and Lisa soundtrack and use of gauzy slow-motion establishing shots give the show an aggressively contemporary feel for 1999, and it's fun to watch something as of its time as Snoops is, especially when of its time doesn't also require overlooking things that haven't aged well on a social level. Unlike a lot of shows of this vintage, there's no weird homophobia, racism, or transphobia, or anything else to that effect. The first few episodes of Snoops have an enjoyable comedic pitch.
Roberta? How's the parallax?
Working fine.
They're raunchy in a way that's silly and amusing.
You look cold. Suppose he gives you a jacket.
This really bothers you, doesn't it?
I just can't believe technology's made it all the way to second base.
These episodes feel like low-ish brow television made by highbrow people, and not in a condescending way. It's not quite camp, but it's something like it.
Stop staring at my cameras. Do you want to touch them?
No.
The specific comedic pitch of Snoops, as well as its female-dominated cast, allows it to feel surprisingly singular, considering detective television as its own genre. All that being said, Snoops quickly becomes a more serious show, where the balance between levity and serious drama is flipped. It's worth noting this change coincides with David E. Kelley writing fewer episodes, and seemingly allowing the writer's room to take the reins. The only times when Snoops really falters are when it gets serious. Not every serious plotline is bad, but those are the ones where the show feels like it's failing to live up to its potential the most often. There's a real issue where episodes are sometimes silly in premise, which is not bad in itself, but when they go for wrought drama, they begin to feel ridiculous in a bad way. Snoops seems to have had a bit of a tone crisis, and it's difficult to say for certain what happened. Was there a deliberate effort to make the plotlines more dramatic, or was Kelley not able to instruct the writers on how to handle the material? Had Snoops lasted longer, it's possible the other writers would have got a better handle on how the show was supposed to work. When one considers that the first season of a show usually has a lot of growing pains, it's always interesting to think about how shows that only lasted a single season could have evolved had they been given more time. It also needs to be said that the dramatic episodes have a way of damaging the integrity of Hall's character. Too many episodes end with Glenn Hall staring out of her office window with a forlorn expression while nursing a drink, because of a shitty ex-boyfriend or something that reminded her of a traumatic childhood experience. And when this constantly happens, it starts to make her reputation as a powerful and self-assured woman feel like an informed trait. Snoops had a level of self-awareness about these problems. Glenn Hall starts occasionally mentioning how owning a detective agency has stopped being fun around halfway through the series.
This place used to be fun. It should still be fun.
And I can't help but wonder if the writers were telling themselves they were going to eventually get things back on track, or if they were making a statement about the new ongoing reality of the show. When I think of detective shows, the things that come to mind are Monk and Columbo. If that's your idea of what a detective show is, you might be disappointed by Snoops. The interactions between characters in Snoops is the true focus of the series, and genre purists will probably dislike the presence of gizmos like voice polygraphs.
No, I did not.
Vanessa was definitely lying according to the voice polygraph. If you think these things are accurate, which I totally don't.
The mysteries often aren't given enough time to breathe. When each episode has an A plot and a B plot, and each episode is only 45 minutes long, there simply isn't enough time for most mysteries to have any real depth. You can guarantee the character who initially appears to be a victim is actually the antagonist, or that any character with a conspicuously small part is going to circle back around later and turn out to be the instigator of a problem. There simply isn't enough space for a healthy number of red herrings and dead ends, which means mysteries are often predictable. True Believers, an episode of 2 plotlines relating to a single mystery, manages to have easily the best mystery in the entire show. I enjoy that Snoops manages to be snappy by moving between 2 plotlines, but they could have had both plotlines relate to the same mystery more often, or experimented more with just having a single A plot. It was announced that Snoops would get cancelled before its 13 episodes had finished airing and being produced. Paula Marshall, Dana Plant's actress, left the series on its 11th episode. I did a little digging and couldn't find out why she left. Danny Nucci was her long-term partner and eventual husband, and I imagine she enjoyed being able to work on the same show as him.
Well, I'm telling you, Dana, you do great work. I got movement just watching you.
Why, thank you, Manny. You know, it means so much more coming from your peers.
This is pure speculation, but I'm guessing Marshall had to leave Snoops for life reasons, rather than her disliking the series. After Marshall was written out of the series, she was replaced by Jessalyn Gilsig, playing a character named Suzanne Shivers. Shivers is introduced as an FBI agent who, within the space of an episode, decides to leave the force and join Glenn Hall Inc. as a PI. The character is an obvious transplant for Dana Plant, except with a less dorky demeanor. It's not exactly uncommon for a TV series to lose a major cast member between its first and second seasons. Examples include Tracy Scoggins, who played Cat Grant in Lois and Clark, and Denise Crosby, who played Tasha Yar in The Next Generation. The difference is that the character of Greg McCormack was heavily tied to Plant, and Marshall leaving also deprived his character of future plot lines. While Snoops definitely could have continued without the character of Dana Plant, it seems her departure did a lot to end the series. ABC decided to move Snoops to a different time slot to make space for Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, and Marshall's plans to leave the series were part of why David Kelley decided not to fight against the show's inevitable cancellation. It also needs to be acknowledged that when Snoops was airing, Kelley was showrunning 3 other shows, with a 4th show entering production. He probably didn't have the time, energy, or desire to try and move the show to a different network. The creators who have that kind of fight in them usually don't have any other series on the air, much less 4. The cancellation of Snoops was announced far enough in advance that its final episode was able to be rewritten into a proper series finale. The episode concerns a female rock musician who's clearly inspired by Joan Jett. As you might expect, the musician has an evil manager who's trying to kill her in order to access some unreleased recordings and make her music more valuable. Glenn Hall reveals that she always had wanted to play guitar but never had the chance to, something that had never been mentioned before.
I thought there was nothing in the world cooler or sexier than a woman with a guitar.
Why'd you stop playing?
I don't know. Stuff happens.
Glenn Hall also mentions that she no longer enjoys being a detective, and the musician convinces her to quit her job and become a guitarist instead, which she does. The series ends with a performance of These Boots Were Made for Walkin'. I can't help but wonder how much input Gershon had into this ending. Around this time, she was producing a film called Pray for Rock and Roll, and receiving guitar lessons from the actual Joan Jett. When Pray for Rock and Roll was eventually released a few years later, she went on a short tour promoting the film, which was chronicled in an IFC miniseries called Rocked. I get the impression this ending was satisfying some kind of personal desire of Gershon's. I loved the ending, but it would not surprise me if a lot of people watching the show found it abrupt and unexpected. Regardless, it does feature a subplot that brings back something from the first episode, which manages to bookend things. And to some degree, it manages to recontextualize the show into being a miniseries, allowing it to end conclusively instead of with some kind of non-ending. Snoops was definitely not a perfect show, but it's the kind of show where it's easy to imagine its second season being a significant improvement. Many of its tonal problems were the kinds of things that get ironed out when a writing staff is allowed to analyze their work and think about what went wrong. I can only speculate about why Snoops failed. The show, like most shows, was canceled due to low ratings. But what was the root of that? David Kelley said Snoops was of a genre he was not comfortable with, which, if true, isn't reflected in the episodes he wrote. I think there's a deeper reason Snoops failed. People weren't enlightened enough to see its appeal. Gina Gershon's career is not as great as it should have been. In a sense, she's had a wonderful career. She's worked a lot. She's appeared in many different movies and TV shows. But it quickly becomes obvious that all the things that make her an incredible actress are also things that probably worked against her. Her aura is too dominant and powerful for a lot of cishet guys who don't enjoy assertive women. Likewise, she's too dark, too seductive to be appealing to most cishet women. She's not relatable. She's someone to be competed with. Gina Gershon's most ardent audience has always been gay men and gay women. It seems she's rarely had fans in the business who prefer more demure talent. Audiences have always been too small-minded to turn her into the box office draw she should have been. The world in which Gina Gershon is recognized by everyone as a legendary tier actress, which she is a world where movies like Showgirls and Bound are commonplace instead of singular anomalies. And that's why Snoops failed, in a nutshell. Snoops appears to have been shot on film, and considering its vintage and length would have made for a perfect one-and-done DVD set. The fact that ABC let Kelley film another 3 episodes that never even broadcast in America to bring it to an even 13, with a definite conclusion, seems to indicate this was possibly the plan. Unfortunately, the show is only available as washed-out VHS rips, and due to its obscurity and a lack of demand, will probably never be seen in HD, or even 480 pixel quality. On the other hand, a lot of obscure stuff eventually surfaces on streaming, and so at this point it seems Snoops' best hope is that it eventually is dumped onto Hulu or Tubi or some other streaming service. I'll check every few months to make sure I notice if it happens. Is it worth watching, Snoops? If you enjoy detective shows, sure. If you're nostalgic about old primetime television, sure. If you're a Gina Gershon fan, definitely. There's a feast to be had here. I enjoyed watching Snoops while eating lunch and dinner for about a week. If you're not some combination of those things, you might not get the enjoyment out of it that I did. But I can definitely say that watching Snoops is better than watching the world end on social media right now.